The widow Katherine Sullivan stood at her husband's grave on a bitter October morning in 1868, feeling nothing but the cold Montana wind cutting through her black mourning dress, and wondered if the numbness inside her chest would ever fade into something she could recognize as living again. She had buried Thomas 3 months ago, though the war had taken him 2 years before that. He had come home from Appomattox a different man, haunted and hollow, barely recognizing the woman who had waited faithfully for 4 long years. The consumption that finally claimed him had almost been a mercy, though Katherine would never say such a thing aloud. The young woman she had been at 18, eagerly marrying her childhood sweetheart before he rode off to fight, seemed like a stranger now. At 24, Katherine felt ancient. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Bismarck, North Dakota Territory, where the Missouri River cut through the land like a silver ribbon. Katherine had moved here after Thomas died, needing to escape the pitying looks in her Virginia hometown. Her brother had settled out west years before, and his letters had painted a picture of opportunity and fresh starts. She had sold everything, packed what little remained, and taken the train as far as it would carry her, then a stage coach the rest of the way. Now she lived in a small house on the edge of town, taking in sewing and mending to earn her keep. Her days blurred together in a haze of needle and thread, her nights filled with dreams of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. She was existing, not living, and some part of her knew it. But the alternative, opening her heart to possibility again, seemed impossible. Katherine turned from the grave, pulling her shawl tighter against the wind. The walk back to town took her past the livery stable, where she usually kept her eyes forward, focused on getting home. Today, however, a commotion drew her attention despite herself. A horse had gotten loose, a beautiful chestnut mare wild with panic, rearing and kicking as 3 men tried unsuccessfully to corner her. The animal's eyes rolled white with fear, and Katherine could see blood on her flank, where something had evidently spooked or injured her. The men were shouting, making the situation worse with their aggressive approach. "Give her space," a new voice called out, calm and firm. A tall cowboy stepped into the chaos, his hands raised non-threateningly. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn hat pulled low, but his movements were slow and deliberate as he approached the frightened mare. "Easy now, girl. Nobody's going to hurt you." Katherine found herself frozen, watching as the stranger began to hum, a low melodic sound that somehow cut through the horse's panic. He kept his distance, circling slowly, never making direct eye contact with the animal. The other men had backed off, recognizing someone who knew what he was doing. The mare's ears flickered forward, her attention caught by the humming. The cowboy continued his patient approach, still humming, still moving with that same deliberate gentleness. It took several minutes, but gradually the horse's breathing slowed, her muscles relaxing incrementally. "That's it," the man murmured. "You're safe. I see that cut there. We'll get it fixed up, but you've got to let me help you." Katherine watched, transfixed, as the horse finally allowed the stranger to approach close enough to stroke her neck. His hands moved over her with practiced ease, checking the wound, soothing her with quiet words. There was something about his patience, his gentleness with the frightened creature, that made Katherine's chest ache with an emotion she could not quite name. "Ethan Foster," one of the other men said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you came along. That mare's worth more than everything I own." "She just needed someone to listen," Ethan replied, his voice carrying a hint of the South, though not the sharp Virginia accent Katherine knew. "Texas, maybe, or Arkansas. She's been hurt and scared. Can't blame her for that." He looked up then, and his eyes met Katherine's across the stable yard. They were brown, warm, and kind, with crinkles at the corners that suggested he smiled often. For just a moment, something passed between them, a connection Katherine immediately wanted to deny. She looked away quickly, gathering her skirts. "Madam." Ethan's voice stopped her as she began to walk away. "You dropped this." He had crossed the yard with surprising speed, holding out her handkerchief. It must have slipped from her pocket. Katherine reached for it, careful not to let their fingers touch, but the care in his expression made her pause. "Thank you," she managed, her voice rusty from disuse in casual conversation. "Ethan Foster," he said, introducing himself properly. "I just signed on at the Riverside Ranch, working horses mainly." "Mrs. Sullivan," Katherine replied, emphasizing the title though she wore no ring. She had sold her wedding band for food during the journey west. "I should be going." She hurried away before he could respond, her heart beating faster than it had in months. The feeling frightened her more than the emptiness had. She did not want to feel anything. Feeling meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant the possibility of loss, and Katherine had lost enough for one lifetime. But over the following days, Ethan Foster seemed to appear everywhere she went. Not intentionally, she realized, but Bismarck was still a small enough town that paths naturally crossed. She saw him at the general store, politely helping an elderly woman carry her packages. She glimpsed him outside the church on Sunday, though he did not attend the service itself, just stood quietly looking at the building as if debating something internal. Each time she saw him, he tipped his hat respectfully, never approaching unless circumstances brought them together. There was never any pushiness in his demeanor, just a quiet acknowledgement of her presence that somehow felt more intimate than conversation. Katherine tried to ignore the way her pulse quickened when she spotted him. She reminded herself daily that she was done with love, done with the pain it inevitably brought. Her heart was a closed door, locked and sealed. But Ethan Foster's gentle presence had a way of making her question her own resolve. It was nearly 3 weeks after their first encounter when Katherine found herself in genuine need of help. She had been walking home from delivering finished mending to a client when a wheel on a passing freight wagon broke, sending the vehicle careening toward her. She jumped aside, but not quickly enough to avoid falling hard against the wooden sidewalk. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand. "Don't move." Ethan was there, seemingly materialized from nowhere, kneeling beside her with concern written across his features. "Let me see if it's broken." "I'm fine," Katherine insisted, though tears pricked her eyes from the pain. "Madam, with respect, you're not fine. Please let me help." His hands were gentle as they checked her ankle, careful and professional despite the intimacy of the gesture. Katherine found herself studying his face up close for the first time. He was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and a small scar above his left eyebrow. His brown hair curled slightly where it brushed his collar, and his jaw was shadowed with a day's growth of beard. "Not broken," he announced after a moment, "but badly twisted. You should not be walking on it." Before she could protest, he had scooped her up in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. "Where do you live?" Katherine wanted to object, to insist on her independence, but the pain in her ankle and the steadiness of his hold convinced her to give him directions instead. He carried her the 4 blocks to her small house, his gait smooth and even, never jostling her injured foot. Curious eyes watched from windows and doorways, and Katherine knew the gossip would spread like wildfire, but she found she could not quite bring herself to care. "Key?" Ethan asked when they reached her door. "In my pocket." He somehow managed to retrieve it without setting her down, then opened the door and carried her inside. The house was Spartan but clean, her sewing materials neatly organized on a table by the window. Ethan settled her gently into the single armchair, then looked around for something to prop up her foot. "I'll get it," Katherine started to say, but he was already moving, finding a small stool and a cushion without needing to ask. He positioned her ankle carefully, then stepped back. "You should keep it elevated for a few days. Ice if you can get it, but at minimum cold compresses. Do you have someone who can help? Bring you meals and such?" Katherine shook her head, hating the admission of her isolation. "I can manage." Ethan's expression suggested he doubted that, but he did not argue. "Is it all right if I check on you tomorrow, just to make sure you're doing all right?" Every instinct told Katherine to refuse, to maintain the walls she had built so carefully around herself. But the genuine concern in his eyes weakened her resolve. "I suppose that would be acceptable," he smiled then, a gentle expression that transformed his entire face. "I'll come by around midday if that suits you. Maybe bring some soup from the boarding house. Mrs. Chen makes the best beef stew in the territory." After he left, Katherine sat in the quiet house, her ankle throbbing but her mind racing. She told herself his interest was merely kindness, the sort any decent person would show someone in need. But the way her heart had responded to his touch, the comfort she had felt in his arms, suggested something more dangerous was taking root despite her best efforts to prevent it. True to his word, Ethan appeared the next day at noon, carrying a covered pot that steamed in the cold air. He let himself in at her called invitation, then stopped short at the sight of her still in the armchair where he had left her. "Mrs. Sullivan, did you sleep there?" "I could not make it to the bedroom," Katherine admitted, embarrassed. Without a word, Ethan set down the pot and crossed to her. "May I?" At her reluctant nod, he lifted her again, this time carrying her to the small bedroom and settling her on the bed. He brought the stool and cushion, repositioning her ankle, then returned with the pot of stew and a spoon. "You should eat," he said. "Can you manage, or do you need help?" "I can manage," Katherine said quickly, taking the bowl, but her hands shook slightly. Whether from hunger or his proximity she could not say. Ethan busied himself around the small house, not leaving as she had expected. He tidied the few dishes in her kitchen, brought in more firewood, and even pumped fresh water from her well. Katherine ate the stew, which was indeed delicious, and watched him work with a mixture of confusion and something that felt dangerously like longing. "You don't have to do all this," she said when he returned to check on her. "I know." He pulled a straight-back chair from the kitchen and sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "But I'd like to if you'll let me, at least until you're back on your feet." "Why?" The question escaped before Katherine could stop it. Ethan was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I know what it's like to be alone in a place where everyone's a stranger, and because helping someone who needs it is just the right thing to do. And maybe, if I'm being honest, because I'd like to get to know you better, Mrs. Sullivan." "There's nothing to know." Katherine's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'm a widow, that's all there is." "I don't believe that." Ethan's tone remained gentle despite her harshness. "But I won't push. I'll just come by to help until you're healed. No expectations. No strings." He was true to his word in the days that followed. Ethan appeared every midday with food, usually from the boarding house, but sometimes dishes he had clearly prepared himself. He helped her move around when necessary, brought her sewing materials so she could work from bed, and gradually made himself useful in a dozen small ways she had not even realized she needed. And he talked. Not constantly, not overwhelming her with chatter, but sharing pieces of his story in the quiet moments. He had grown up in Arkansas, the youngest of 5 boys. His family had owned a small horse ranch that was destroyed during the war, burned by raiders who cared nothing for which side his family supported. He had spent years drifting afterward, working ranches across Texas and Kansas and Colorado, learning everything there was to know about horses. "Why Bismarck?" Katherine asked one afternoon, surprising herself with her curiosity. Heard the Riverside Ranch was looking for someone good with problem horses. Horses other folks had given up on. I've always had a way with the difficult ones. He smiled slightly. Maybe because I was difficult myself once. My mama used to say I had too much stubbornness and not enough sense. "What happened to your family?" Katherine found herself asking. After the ranch burned, Ethan's expression grew somber. "My parents passed within a year of each other. Broken hearts, I think, though the doctor called it fever. My brothers scattered. Last I heard, 2 went to California, 1 to Oregon, and 1 back east. We don't keep in touch much. Sometimes families just drift apart after enough hardship." Katherine understood that more than she wanted to admit. "My family thought I was crazy, coming out here alone, but I couldn't stay where everything reminded me of before." "Before?" Ethan asked gently. She had not talked about Thomas to anyone in Bismarck, had worn her widowhood like armor without explaining the wounds beneath it. But something about Ethan's patient presence made the words come easier than they ever had before. "My husband went to war in 1861. We'd only been married a year. He was 20, full of ideals and certainty about right and wrong." Katherine's voice grew distant with memory. "He came back in 1865 a stranger. Couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. He'd wake up screaming from dreams he wouldn't talk about, and he looked at me sometimes like he didn't even know who I was." "The war did that to a lot of men," Ethan said quietly. "I was too young to fight, but I saw what it did. The ones who came back weren't always the ones who left. He got sick 2 years after coming home. Consumption. By the time he died, there was almost a relief in it, which makes me a terrible person." Katherine's throat tightened. "He'd been gone long before his body caught up. And I'd already mourned him years before he was in the ground. That doesn't make you terrible. That makes you human." "I loved him," Katherine said fiercely, as if Ethan had suggested otherwise. "I loved the boy he was. I would have loved the man he could have been. But the war took that possibility away, and I'm angry about it. I'm angry that I lost my husband twice, and I'm angry that I'm only 24 and feel used up, and I'm angry that everyone expects me to just move on like it was nothing." She was crying now, tears she had not allowed herself since the funeral, maybe since long before that. Ethan did not try to touch her or shush her. He just sat quietly, letting her cry, his presence steady and undemanding. When the tears finally subsided, Katherine felt oddly lighter, as if some pressure had been released. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her face with the handkerchief he handed her. "Don't be. Sometimes we need to let it out. You must think I'm pathetic." "I think you're brave," Ethan corrected. "You survived something that would have broken a lot of people. You're building a new life in a hard place. That takes courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like running away. Sometimes running away and starting over look the same. Doesn't make either one wrong." Over the next week, as Katherine's ankle healed, she found herself looking forward to Ethan's visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts, observations about Bismarck's colorful characters, dreams about what the future might hold. He told her about the horses he was working with, the young stallion who was too smart for his own good, the elderly mare who had been rescued from an abusive owner and was learning to trust again. "That's what you do, isn't it?" Katherine said one day. "You teach them to trust again, I suppose." Horses are honest creatures. If you hurt them, they remember. But if you're patient, if you show them you're safe, they'll give you a chance. Sometimes that's all anyone needs, horse or human, just a chance. The words settled into Katherine's heart, taking root, despite her best efforts to remain distant. She began to notice things about Ethan she had tried to ignore, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands, the way he listened like her words truly mattered. He never pushed her, never made her feel rushed or pressured. He was just there, steady and patient, like he had all the time in the world when her ankle was healed enough for her to walk again. Katherine felt a pang of loss at the thought of their daily visits ending. But Ethan, with his characteristic perceptiveness, seemed to understand. "I was thinking," he said on what should have been his last visit, "there's a church social next Sunday. Music and dancing and probably too much pie. Would you consider coming? With me?" Catherine's immediate instinct was to refuse, to retreat back into her safe isolation. But she thought of the past weeks, of how alive she had felt talking with him, sharing with him. She thought of the widow she had been when she arrived in Bismarck, numb and hollow, and the woman she felt herself becoming in Ethan's gentle presence. "I don't dance," she said, which was not quite a refusal. "Neither do I much, but I'm good at eating pie. And I'd like to spend time with you, Katherine, if you'll let me. No pressure, just two people enjoying an afternoon." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his voice made her heart skip. She should say no. She should protect herself. But looking at Ethan's hopeful, patient expression, Katherine found herself saying, "All right. Yes." His smile was radiant. "I'll pick you up at noon." The church social was held in the town square, where someone had constructed a makeshift dance floor and long tables groaned under the weight of donated food. Half the town seemed to be present, farmers and ranchers and shopkeepers, all mingling together. Katherine felt self-conscious in her simple blue dress, the only one she owned that was not black, but Ethan's obvious appreciation made her feel almost pretty. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. They filled plates with food and found a spot on the edge of the gathering where they could watch the festivities without being in the thick of them. Ethan kept up a running commentary on the various townspeople, making Katherine laugh with his observations. He pointed out the banker who was secretly courting the schoolteacher, the rival shopkeepers who were friendly everywhere except when discussing business, the minister's wife who had a tendency to spike her own punch when she thought no one was looking. "How do you know all this?" Katherine asked, amazed at his knowledge of town gossip despite only being in Bismarck a couple months. "I listen. People talk around the ranch hands like we're not there. You'd be amazed what you learn when folks think you're not paying attention." The band started playing, fiddles and a piano someone had hauled out on a wagon, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Katherine watched them spin and sway, feeling a wistful longing for the days when she had been carefree enough to dance. "Would you like to try?" Ethan asked softly. "I told you I don't dance." "I know what you told me. I'm asking what you'd like to do." Katherine looked at him, this patient man who had somehow worked his way past her defenses without her quite noticing. "I'd like to," she admitted, "but I'm scared. Of dancing. Of what it means. Of feeling again. Of letting myself want something just to have it taken away." Ethan set down his plate and turned to face her fully. "I can't promise you won't ever hurt again, Katherine. Life doesn't work that way, but I can promise I'll never hurt you on purpose. And I can promise that I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to go. What if I'm not ready? Then I'll wait. I'm a patient man." He stood and offered his hand. "But right now I'm just asking for a dance. Nothing more. Can you give me that?" Katherine looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, steady and sure. She thought about the past 2 years of grief and numbness, of merely existing instead of living. She thought about how Ethan had made her laugh, made her cry, made her feel human again. And she thought about the fact that Thomas would never have wanted her to stop living, even if she had not been able to help him do the same. She placed her hand in Ethan's. He led her to the dance floor, where the band was playing a simple waltz. Ethan's arm came around her waist, respectful and proper, and he guided her into the steps with an easy grace that surprised her. They were both rusty, stumbling occasionally, but neither seemed to care. Katherine felt like she was floating, held safe in his arms, the music washing over her like a blessing. "You said you don't dance," she accused lightly. "I said I don't dance much. Doesn't mean I never learned." He spun her gently, and Katherine felt something inside her chest crack open, something that had been frozen for too long. They danced 3 songs before Katherine needed to rest, breathless and smiling in a way she had not smiled in years. Ethan fetched her lemonade, and they found a quiet spot beneath a cottonwood tree where they could watch the festivities continue. "Thank you," Katherine said. "For what?" "For being patient with me. For not giving up." Ethan reached over and took her hand, a bold gesture by his usual standards. "Katherine, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to replace your husband. I'm not trying to make you forget him. I just want a chance to know you, to be part of your life going forward, however much or little you're willing to give. What if I don't know how to do this anymore? What if I'm too broken?" "You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I'm in no hurry. I told you I'm patient." "Why me?" Katherine asked, the question that had been plaguing her since he first carried her home. "There are plenty of women in Bismarck who would be interested in a good man like you. Women without my baggage. Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands loss, someone who knows life isn't always easy but keeps going anyway. Someone who survived and come out stronger even if she doesn't recognize it yet." Ethan's brown eyes were earnest, holding hers. "And if I'm being completely honest, because from the first moment I saw you at that cemetery, something in my chest said that one. She's worth waiting for." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but they were different this time, softer. "I'm scared, Ethan." "I know. That's all right. Being scared doesn't mean you can't try." The autumn days grew shorter as October gave way to November. Katherine found herself spending more time with Ethan, cautiously lowering the walls around her heart brick by careful brick. He continued to visit regularly, though now they both called it what it was, courting rather than simple neighborly help. He took her on walks along the river when the weather permitted, the Montana landscape painted in golds and reds before winter's approach. He brought her small gifts, never anything extravagant: a pretty stone he found by the water, a book he thought she might enjoy, a bundle of dried flowers. Each gift was thoughtful, showing how much attention he paid to her preferences and interests. In turn, Katherine found herself opening up in ways she had not thought possible. She told him about her childhood in Virginia, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress. She spoke of her dreams of having children someday, though that seemed less likely now. She shared her love of reading, of poetry especially, and her secret desire to see the ocean, though she likely never would. "Never say never," Ethan told her. "The world's bigger than Bismarck. Maybe someday we'll travel, see some of those places you dream about." The casual way he said "we," including himself in her future, made Katherine's heart flutter even as it frightened her. But she was learning to sit with the fear rather than running from it, learning to trust that Ethan truly meant his patient promises. One chilly November afternoon, Ethan asked if she would come to the ranch to meet some of the horses he worked with. Katherine agreed, curious about this part of his life she had only heard about. He borrowed a wagon and drove her out to the Riverside Ranch, a sprawling operation that ran cattle and horses across several thousand acres. The ranch was busy with hands preparing for winter, making repairs and laying in supplies. Ethan introduced Katherine to several of the men he worked with, all of whom treated her with respect and seemed genuinely fond of Ethan. Then he led her to a separate corral where several horses stood, these apart from the main herd. "These are my special cases," Ethan explained. "The ones other people gave up on." He showed her the young stallion he had mentioned, a beautiful black horse with a white star on his forehead. "This is Midnight. He was beaten by his previous owner for being too spirited. Took me 2 months before he'd let me touch him without flinching." As if to demonstrate Midnight's progress, Ethan approached the horse slowly, speaking softly. The stallion's ears pricked forward, and he walked over to nuzzle Ethan's shoulder, accepting the offered apple with gentle lips. "He's beautiful," Katherine breathed. He just needed someone to see past the fear to the horse underneath. Ethan stroked Midnight's neck. "Same with the others. That mare there, the gray, she was starved half to death when they found her. And the bay gelding, he was in a fire and was terrified of everything afterward. They all just needed patience and understanding." Katherine watched Ethan with the horses, seeing how each one responded to his gentle handling, his quiet confidence. She understood what he had been trying to tell her all along, that healing took time, that trust had to be rebuilt slowly, that patience could overcome even deep wounds. "Can I try?" she asked impulsively. Ethan's face lit up. "Of course. Here, hold your hand out flat, palm up. Let them come to you." He placed a piece of apple in her palm, then stood behind her, his presence steadying. Katherine held her hand out to Midnight, who regarded her with intelligent dark eyes. For a long moment, the horse just stood there, assessing. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and delicately took the apple from her hand. Katherine laughed with delight, the sound surprising her with its genuine joy. Ethan's arms came around her waist from behind, not constraining, just sharing the moment. Katherine leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had not felt in years. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." Ethan's breath was warm against her ear. "Katherine, I need to tell you something." She turned in his arms, looking up at his serious face. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since that first day at the cemetery, watching you stand there so brave and alone. I know it might be too soon for you to hear that, and I'm not asking you to say it back. I just need you to know that this isn't casual for me. You're not just someone I'm passing time with." Katherine's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to pull away, to refuse this vulnerable honesty. But looking into Ethan's eyes, seeing the genuine emotion there, she found she could not bear to hurt him with her own cowardice. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted, the words terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "It scares me to death, but I am. I don't know if I know how to do this anymore, how to love someone and trust it will last, but I want to try. With you." Ethan's smile was brilliant. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "May I kiss you?" Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. Ethan leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, then pressed his lips to hers in a kiss so gentle it made her ache. It was nothing like the passionate kisses of her youth with Thomas, but it was perfect in its own way, tender and patient and full of promise. When they parted, Katherine was crying in earnest, but they were good tears, healing tears. Ethan held her close, letting her cry, his hand stroking her back in soothing circles. "We'll go as slow as you need," he murmured. "I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." Winter arrived in full force, blanketing Bismarck in snow and cold. Katherine's sewing business slowed as people stayed indoors, but Ethan made sure she had plenty of firewood and supplies. He could not visit as often, his work at the ranch keeping him busy in the harsh weather, But he came when he could, and Katherine found herself counting the days between his visits. She had never expected to feel this way again, this anticipation and longing. Part of her still felt guilty, as if loving Ethan somehow betrayed Thomas's memory. But she had come to understand, through long, quiet evenings of reflection, that Thomas would have wanted her to live. He had not been himself at the end, but the boy she married had loved her, and that boy would never have wished her a lifetime of loneliness. Christmas approached, and with it the painful memories of past holidays. Katherine threw herself into making gifts for the few people she had grown close to in Bismarck, her brother's family, a few women from church, and Ethan. For him, she labored over a special shirt, fine blue cloth she could barely afford, stitching it with extra care in the evenings by lamplight. On Christmas Eve, Ethan appeared at her door with a pine branch and a shy smile. "I know it's not much, but I thought you might like something festive." Katherine had been feeling melancholy all day, memories of past Christmases weighing heavy. But Ethan's simple gift, the thoughtfulness of it, lightened her spirit. She invited him in, and they sat by her fire, sharing the meal she had prepared and talking long into the night. "I have something for you," Katherine said finally, retrieving the wrapped shirt. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have something." Ethan opened the package carefully, his face transforming with wonder when he saw the shirt. "Katherine, this is beautiful. You made this." "I wanted to. You've given me so much, and I wanted to give you something in return." "You've given me plenty." Ethan set the shirt aside carefully, then reached into his coat pocket. "I have something for you too." He pulled out a small wooden box, clearly handmade, the wood polished to a soft sheen. Inside, nestled on a piece of felt, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. "Ethan, this is too much," Katherine protested, even as her fingers itched to touch it. "Open it," he urged. The locket sprang open to reveal two empty frames waiting for photographs. "I know you carry your husband's memory in your heart," Ethan said quietly. "This isn't meant to replace that. But I hoped maybe someday you might want to put new memories in here too, whatever ones matter most to you." Katherine's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time since meeting this man. The gift was perfect, acknowledging her past while offering space for the future. She threw her arms around Ethan's neck, holding him tight. "Help me put it on," she said. His fingers were gentle as they fastened the clasp at the back of her neck. The locket settled against Katherine's chest, right over her heart, feeling right in a way she had not expected. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "I love you, Ethan Foster, and I'm done being scared of it." Ethan's kiss was less gentle this time, conveying months of patient longing. Katherine responded with equal fervor, wrapping her arms around him, allowing herself to feel everything she had been holding back. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "What?" "Marry me, Katherine. I know it's soon. I know you need time, but I also know what I want, and it's a life with you. I'll wait as long as you need, but I wanted you to know my intentions are serious." Katherine's heart raced. It was too soon, far too soon. They had only known each other a few months. But she also knew that she felt more alive with Ethan than she had in years, that he had awakened something in her she thought was dead forever. And she knew that she did not want to waste time being cautious when life was already so uncertain. "Yes," she said, shocking herself. "Yes." Ethan pulled back to look at her face, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not right away, I need a little time, but yes. I want to build a life with you, Ethan. I want to see where this goes. I want to stop being afraid and start living again." Ethan lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in the small parlor, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, He kissed her again, and Katherine felt the last pieces of ice around her heart finally melt away. They set the wedding for April, giving themselves time to prepare and for Katherine to feel truly ready. The months between Christmas and spring were the happiest Katherine had known in years. She and Ethan spent every spare moment together, planning their future, learning each other's habits and quirks, building the foundation of their life together. Ethan introduced her to his world at the ranch, teaching her to ride properly, though she would never be as confident on horseback as he was. Katherine shared her love of books with him, reading aloud on quiet evenings while he listened with rapt attention. They talked about everything, their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. "I want children," Katherine admitted one March afternoon as they walked along the river, the ice beginning to break up with the approaching spring. "I'd made peace with maybe never having them, but now with you I find myself hoping again." "I want that too," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "A whole house full if we're blessed. I want to build something lasting, Katherine. A family, a home, a life that matters." "We'll need a bigger house then. Mine is barely big enough for me. I've been thinking about that. The ranch owner is selling some parcels of land to his most trusted hands. There's a beautiful spot near the river with good grazing and space to build. I've saved enough for a down payment. We could build something together, exactly how we want it." Katherine's imagination caught fire with the possibility. A real home, not just a place to hide, but somewhere to build a future. "Yes," she said, "let's do it." They spent their evenings sketching plans. Katherine's practical eye combined with Ethan's knowledge of creating something truly special on paper. Nothing grand, but solid and comfortable, with room to grow. A real bedroom, a large kitchen where Katherine could work, a parlor with space for books and comfort. And upstairs, rooms that could one day hold the children they both hoped for. April arrived with the wildflowers, carpeting the prairie in colors after the long winter. Katherine's brother and his family arrived from the eastern part of the territory, and the small church in Bismarck filled with the friends they had made. Katherine wore a simple dress she had made herself, cream-colored with blue trim, practical but pretty. Ethan wore the shirt she had given him at Christmas, his face radiant as she walked down the aisle toward him. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the minister asked Katherine to speak her vows, she looked into Ethan's eyes and spoke from the heart. "I thought I was done with love," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I thought I'd used up my chance at happiness, but you showed me that the heart is more resilient than I knew, that healing is possible, that love can come again if you're brave enough to let it. You've been patient with me, gentle with my wounds and steadfast in your devotion. I promise to love you with everything I have, to build a life with you full of joy and meaning, to be your partner in all things. I promise to be brave enough to deserve the gift of your love." There was not a dry eye in the church when she finished. Ethan's own vows were equally moving, promising to cherish her, protect her, and walk beside her through whatever life brought. When the minister pronounced them married and Ethan kissed her, Katherine felt truly reborn, the widow she had been transforming into a wife again, but different this time, stronger and more sure. The wedding celebration was joyful, with music and dancing and enough food to feed the whole town. Katherine danced with her new husband, no longer afraid of the joy she felt, no longer holding back. She was living again, truly living, and it felt like a miracle. That night, in the small hotel room Ethan had rented for their wedding night, Katherine and Ethan came together as husband and wife. It was tender and passionate, nervous and exciting, two people learning each other in the most intimate way. Katherine had worried it might feel like a betrayal of her first marriage, but it did not. This was different, new, something entirely its own. This was choosing to move forward, choosing life and love and possibility. Afterward, lying in Ethan's arms, Katherine felt at peace in a way she had not since before the war changed everything. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for being patient, for showing me I could love again. Thank you for giving me the chance." Ethan kissed her forehead. "You're the bravest person I know, Katherine Foster." The name made her smile. She was Katherine Foster now, a new person with a new life stretching ahead of her. The past would always be part of her. Thomas would always hold a place in her memories, but she was no longer defined by loss. She was defined by the choice to keep going, to keep hoping, to keep loving. They spent a week in a small cabin outside town, a borrowed honeymoon spot where they could be alone together. They made love and talked for hours, cooked simple meals together, and planned their future. Ethan taught Katherine things about horses and ranching, and she shared more of her love for poetry and stories. They were learning to be married, to be partners, finding their rhythm together. When they returned to Bismarck, it was to begin work on their house. The land Ethan had purchased was everything he had described, a beautiful plot with the river visible in the distance and enough space for horses and maybe some cattle eventually. They lived in Katherine's small house in town while they built, spending every spare moment at the building site. Ethan did most of the heavy work with help from other ranch hands, but Katherine was there whenever she could be, helping with what she was able, making decisions about placement and design. She loved watching the house take shape, walls rising where before there had been only prairie grass. This was theirs, built by their hands and their dreams. By midsummer, the house was livable enough to move into, though finishing touches would take more months. Katherine stood in the empty parlor, looking out the window at the view of the river, and felt overwhelming gratitude. A year ago, she had been a broken widow, merely existing. Now she was a wife again, building a home and a future with a man who had proven that love could be gentle and patient and healing. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "That I'm happy, truly, deeply happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again." "Me too." He rested his chin on top of her head. "I love you, Katherine. I love you too." Fall came again, marking a full year since Katherine had first seen Ethan at the livery stable. She was amazed how much her life had changed in 12 months. They hosted Thanksgiving in their new house, inviting Katherine's brother's family and several friends from town and the ranch. The house rang with laughter and conversation, full of life and warmth. As Katherine looked around the table at the people she had grown to care for, at her husband at the head of the table telling a story that had everyone laughing, she felt Thomas's memory settle into its proper place. He was part of her history, would always be, but he no longer defined her present. She had honored his memory by surviving, by rebuilding, by having the courage to love again. That night, after their guests had left and the house was quiet, Katherine realized her monthly courses were late, very late. She had not wanted to mention it to Ethan, afraid of raising hopes that might be dashed, but the possibility thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. Another week passed before she was certain enough to tell him. She planned it carefully, waiting until they were sitting by the fire after supper, content and relaxed. "Ethan," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness, "I need to tell you something." He set down the newspaper he had been reading, immediately attentive. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so. I hope not." She took a breath. "I'm fairly certain I'm with child." The joy that flooded Ethan's face was instantaneous and absolute. He lifted her from her chair and spun her around, both of them laughing. "Are you sure? When?" "I'm sure. The baby should come late spring if all goes well." "A baby?" Ethan's voice was full of wonder. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." Katherine covered his hand with hers, tears streaming down her face again, but these were purely joyful. "Our baby," she agreed. The pregnancy was not easy. Katherine suffered terrible sickness in the early months, and there were moments of fear when she spotted blood or felt cramping. But Ethan was endlessly patient and supportive, holding her through the bad nights, celebrating the good days, making sure she rested and ate properly. The local doctor, an elderly German man with kind eyes, assured them that everything looked normal despite the scares. As Katherine's belly grew with the winter, so did their anticipation. They prepared a room for the baby, painting it soft yellow since they did not know if they were having a boy or girl. Katherine sewed tiny clothes with trembling hands, amazed that she was creating a whole new person. Ethan built a cradle from pine, carving it with careful detail, a labor of love. "What do you hope for?" Katherine asked one evening as they worked on the nursery together. "A boy or girl, healthy," Ethan said immediately. "That's all I care about, but if I had to choose, maybe a girl. A daughter with your strength and kindness." "I was thinking a boy, a son with your patience and gentle heart. Either way, they'll be loved beyond measure." The baby came in late May, after a long and difficult labor that terrified Ethan and exhausted Katherine. But when the doctor finally placed the squalling infant in Katherine's arms, every moment of pain evaporated in the overwhelming rush of love. "A boy," the doctor announced, "strong and healthy." Katherine looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect features and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand impossibly. Ethan knelt beside the bed, his face wet with tears, touching the baby's tiny hand with wonder. "He's perfect," Ethan breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. They had discussed names endlessly but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Katherine knew. "Everett," she said. "After your father, Everett Thomas Foster." Ethan looked up sharply at the middle name, understanding the honor she was giving to her first husband's memory. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Thomas was part of making me who I am, which means he's part of what brought me to you. It feels right to honor that." "Everett Thomas Foster," Ethan repeated, testing it. "It's perfect. He's perfect. You're perfect." He kissed her forehead, then his son's. "Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for giving me this." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Everett was a fussy baby, colicky and difficult to soothe. But Katherine and Ethan worked together, taking turns with the night feedings, supporting each other through the sleepless fog. Katherine had never seen Ethan more in his element than when holding their son, humming the same gentle melodies he used with frightened horses, his large hands cradling the tiny body with infinite care. "You're wonderful with him," Katherine observed one night, watching Ethan pace with a crying Everett. "I've had practice with scared creatures," Ethan said with a tired smile. "And he's not so different, really. Just needs to know he's safe and loved." As Everett grew, Katherine marveled at the life they had built. Their house was filled with love and laughter, messy but happy. Ethan's work at the ranch was going well, and he had taken on additional responsibility, training horses, which came with better pay. Katherine had resumed taking in sewing, work she could do while caring for Everett, contributing to their household income. Money was not plentiful, but they had enough. More importantly, they had each other, they had their son, they had their home. Katherine had never imagined this kind of happiness was possible after the darkness she had lived through. When Everett was a year old, Katherine realized she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to do. They welcomed a daughter in the spring of 1871, a tiny girl with Ethan's brown eyes and Katherine's determined chin. "Eleanor," Katherine announced. "After my mother, Eleanor Rose Foster." "She's beautiful," Ethan said, cradling his daughter, "just like her mother." With 2 young children, life became even busier. But Katherine had never been happier, despite the exhaustion and chaos. This was the family she had dreamed of, the life she had thought was lost to her forever. Every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every first word and first step was a gift she treasured. The years passed in the pleasant rhythm of family life. Everett grew into a serious boy who loved helping his father with the horses. Eleanor was more mischievous, always getting into something, keeping them on their toes. In 1873, they welcomed another son whom they named Emmett, and their family felt complete. Katherine's relationship with Ethan only deepened with time. They were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through the challenges and celebrating the joys. The gentle patience that had first drawn Katherine to Ethan remained a cornerstone of their marriage. He was never harsh with her or the children, never raised his voice in anger. When conflicts arose, as they inevitably did in any marriage, they talked through them with respect and care. "How did I get so lucky?" Katherine asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, the children finally asleep inside. "Lucky," Ethan laughed. "Katherine, you survived a war, losing your husband, rebuilding your life alone in a new place. That's not luck, that's strength." "I mean lucky to find you, to get this second chance." Ethan took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I think we found each other exactly when we were meant to. You weren't ready before and I wasn't looking, but that day at the cemetery something clicked, like recognizing something I didn't know I'd been missing. I was so determined not to love again. I know. That's what made your choice to try so brave." He pulled her closer, and Katherine settled against his shoulder, content. "I hope you know you've given me everything I ever wanted. This life, our family, you. I fall more in love with you every day." "Me too," Katherine said softly. "I never thought I could love like this again, so openly and without fear. You taught me that healing was possible, that my heart was stronger than I knew." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge, the prairie stretching endlessly before them. Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and loss and eventual rebirth. She thought about Thomas, whom she still remembered with fondness but no longer grief. He had been her first love, shaping her youth, and she would always honor that. But Ethan was her forever love, the one who had shown her that life could begin again. As the years continued to pass, Katherine and Ethan's life took on the comfortable patterns of an established family. Everett, at 8, was his father's shadow, spending every possible moment at the ranch learning about horses. Eleanor, at 6, had her mother's talent with a needle and loved helping with the mending. Little Emmett, at 4, was still trying to figure out where he fit, but showed early signs of his father's gentle way with animals. The ranch had prospered, and with it, Ethan's position. He had become the head trainer, respected throughout the territory for his work with difficult horses. They had expanded their home, adding more rooms and a larger barn for the horses Ethan sometimes brought home to work with personally. Katherine's sewing had evolved into a real business. She was known for her fine work, and women from miles around brought her their most important projects. She had even hired 2 young women to help with the simpler tasks, teaching them the trade while freeing herself to focus on the most intricate work and her family. In 1877, when Everett was 10, Eleanor 8, and Emmett 6, Katherine realized she was pregnant again. At 33, she had thought they were done having children, but the surprise was a welcome one. Ethan was overjoyed, though concerned for Katherine's health given her age. "I'm fine," she assured him. Tired but fine. Our family can always use more love. Their fourth child, another daughter they named Eliza, arrived in early 1878. She was a happy baby, easy and content in a way the others had not been. Katherine, experienced now in motherhood, handled the new addition with practiced ease, and the older children doted on their baby sister. Life was full and rich, exactly what Katherine had never dared to dream during those dark widow days. She and Ethan had been married nearly 9 years, and their love had only deepened. They had built something remarkable together, not just a family but a true partnership based on mutual respect, support, and abiding affection. One evening, when Eliza was about 6 months old, Katherine stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out over the land they had transformed from raw prairie into a working homestead. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist as he so often did. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come. About that scared widow who arrived in Bismarck thinking her life was over. I barely recognize her now. She's still in there. She's the foundation of who you are now, all that strength and resilience. You just learned you didn't have to carry it all alone anymore." Katherine turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had changed everything. There was gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to her he was more handsome than ever. She knew every expression, every gesture, every mood. He was home to her in a way no place ever could be. "I love you," she said, the words as true and necessary as breathing. "I love our life, our children, everything we've built together. Thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up when I was too scared to try." "Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done," Ethan replied, kissing her softly. "You're my heart, Katherine, you and our children. Everything good in my life traces back to you." As they stood together in the fading light, Katherine felt profound gratitude for the second chance she had been given. She had thought love was done with her, that she would spend her life as a ghost going through the motions. But Ethan had proven her wrong with his gentle patience, showing her that the heart could indeed heal and love again, perhaps even more deeply than before, because of the pain it had survived. The years continued to unfold in their gentle rhythm. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Everett, serious and responsible, became an accomplished horseman, working alongside his father at the ranch. Eleanor discovered a talent for drawing and painting, creating beautiful images of the prairie and its creatures. Emmett found his calling working with their small herd of cattle, showing an intuitive understanding of animal husbandry. And little Eliza, as she grew, proved to be the family peacemaker, able to smooth over any argument with her sunny disposition. In 1883, when Eliza was 5 and Everett approaching 15, Katherine and Ethan celebrated their 14th wedding anniversary. They had long since established a tradition of taking one evening alone together each year, leaving the children with Katherine's brother's family, and spending the night at the small hotel in town where they had spent their wedding night. As they lay together afterward, content and tired in the best way, Katherine marveled at how the passion between them had never faded. If anything, it had deepened, physical intimacy becoming richer with the years of emotional connection. "You remember our wedding night?" she asked, tracing patterns on Ethan's chest. "I remember being terrified I'd disappoint you," he admitted with a laugh. "Terrified? You never seemed nervous." "I was. You'd been married before, and I wanted so badly to make you happy, to be enough. You've always been enough, more than enough. You've been everything." Katherine propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "I want you to know that you gave me back my life. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You reminded me how to live, how to feel, how to hope. That's a gift beyond measure." "We gave that to each other," Ethan corrected, pulling her back down beside him. "You think I was whole before you. I was drifting, going from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to build something permanent, to put down roots. You gave me a family and a future. We saved each other, Katherine." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had every night for 14 years, each one's last thought before sleep being gratitude for the other. The children continued to grow and thrive. Everett, at 18, was a man now, working full-time at the ranch and courting a sweet girl from town. Eleanor, 16, had begun selling her paintings to supplement the family income, her talent recognized throughout the territory. Emmett, 14, was helping expand their cattle operation, his keen eye for good stock proving invaluable. And Eliza, 8, was the light of everyone's life, beloved by her siblings and parents alike. In 1886, Everett married his sweetheart in the same church where Katherine and Ethan had exchanged vows. Katherine cried watching her firstborn make his own commitment, remembering the tiny baby he had been, the difficult labor that had brought him into the world. Ethan squeezed her hand, understanding as he always did. "Hard to believe he's old enough for this," Ethan whispered. "We were younger when we married," Katherine pointed out. "True. But somehow he seems too young while we were clearly mature and wise." Katherine laughed at that, earning a shushing from someone behind them. But she felt the truth of it, the way time played tricks with perspective. Her son was a man, making his own family, and she and Ethan were entering a new phase of life. Everett and his bride, Anna, built a small house on the edge of Katherine and Ethan's property, staying close to family. Within a year, they announced they were expecting, and Katherine prepared to become a grandmother at 42. The birth of her grandson, named Thomas after the grandfather he would never meet, hit Katherine harder than she expected. Holding the tiny baby, seeing Everett's joy in fatherhood, brought back all the memories she had carefully put away. She found herself crying at odd moments, grieving anew for all that Thomas had missed, the life they should have had. Ethan found her one evening sitting in the nursery they had not used in years, tears streaming down her face as she held the old locket he had given her their first Christmas. She had put pictures in it years ago, one of her and Ethan on their wedding day, the other of all 4 children together. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her chair. "I was just thinking about Thomas. My first Thomas. How he never got to be a father, never got to experience any of this. And I feel guilty, being so happy when he had so little." "Oh, Katherine," Ethan took her hands in his. "You can't carry that guilt. What happened to Thomas was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. And he wouldn't have wanted you to stop living. You know that. I know. I do. It's just holding little Thomas, our grandson, it brought it all back. The war widow I was, the grief I carried. Sometimes I forget how much I lost before I found you. You don't have to forget. That loss is part of your story, part of what made you who you are. And it's okay to grieve for what might have been. That doesn't diminish what we have now." Katherine leaned into him, letting him hold her as she cried for the boy who had gone to war and never really come home, for the young bride she had been, for all the years of pain. But she also felt the solid warmth of Ethan beside her, heard their children's voices drifting from downstairs, thought about the grandson sleeping peacefully in his parents' house nearby. She had lost much, but she had also gained so much more. "I'm glad I have you to talk to about this," she said finally, wiping her eyes. "You never make me feel like I have to choose between honoring my past and living in my present. Because you don't have to choose. It's all part of you, all part of us. Thomas was real. Your marriage to him was real, and that doesn't threaten what we have. If anything, it makes it richer, because you chose this with full knowledge of how precious and fragile love can be. They sat together in the quiet nursery, Catherine's head on Ethan's shoulder, both of them reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Nearly 18 years of marriage, 4 children raised, a grandson born, a life built together from nothing but hope and patience and stubborn love. The years that followed brought more grandchildren. Alina married at 19, a young artist who shared her passion, and they settled in Bismarck where he had a studio. Emmett took over most of the cattle operation, expanding it into a profitable enterprise, and married a rancher's daughter at 21. Even young Eliza, at 16, was being courted by a nice young man who worked at the bank. Katherine and Ethan found themselves entering the grandparent years with grace and joy. Their house, once filled with their own children's noise, now echoed with grandchildren's laughter during frequent visits. They had 7 grandchildren by 1895, with more expected, and each one was treasured. "We're building a dynasty," Ethan joked one evening as they watched their various children and grandchildren gathered for Sunday dinner. "We built a family," Katherine corrected. "That's better than any dynasty." She was 51 now. Her dark hair shot through with silver, her hands showing the marks of decades of needlework. Ethan, at 57, had slowed down a bit, his knees bothering him after years of working with horses. But they were healthy and happy, surrounded by the fruits of their life together. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Katherine and Ethan sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The prairie stretched before them, the same view they had been watching for nearly 27 years. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on a broken widow who couldn't even admit she was lonely?" "Never. Not once." Ethan took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "You were never broken, Katherine. Wounded, yes. Grieving, absolutely, but never broken. And I never took a chance. I made a choice, the best choice of my life." "I was so scared," Katherine remembered. "So certain I couldn't survive losing someone again. I tried so hard to push you away." "I know. But I saw past the fear to the woman underneath. The strong, brave, resilient woman who had survived more than most people could imagine. I knew if you could just let yourself try, you'd realize you were capable of so much more than you thought. You gave me time. You were worth the wait." Katherine thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Bismarck in 1868, numb and hollow, convinced her life was effectively over at 24. She thought about that first sight of Ethan at the livery, calming the frightened horse with such patience and gentleness. She thought about all the moments between then and now, the gradual opening of her heart, the building of trust, the choice to love again despite the risk. "Thank you," she said, the words encompassing everything, 27 years of gratitude. "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for being patient when I was difficult, for loving me through the fear, for giving me this life, these children, this family, for proving me wrong about everything. What did you think that turned out to be wrong? That I could never love again? That my heart was used up? That happiness wasn't meant for me anymore?" Katherine smiled, tears on her cheeks but joy in her heart. "You proved all of that wrong with your gentle patience. You showed me that the heart is endlessly resilient, that love can bloom even in the hardest soil, that it's never too late to start again." Ethan pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars emerge, comfortable in the silence of long marriage. They had built something remarkable together, not just a family or a home, but a testament to the power of patient love to heal even the deepest wounds. The years continued their march. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren as Everett's oldest children began families of their own. Katherine and Ethan grew old together, their bodies slowing but their love remaining constant. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1909, surrounded by more descendants than they could easily count, all of them testament to that choice Katherine had made so many years ago to try loving again. Katherine was 65 now, Ethan 71. They had long since retired from active work, though Ethan still liked to visit the ranch and Katherine still took on special sewing projects. But mostly they spent their days together, reading, talking, watching their legacy unfold. You remember that first day at the cemetery? Katherine asked one autumn afternoon, the leaves falling like gold around them. When you were just a stranger calming a horse. I remember thinking you looked so lost and so brave at the same time. And I remember knowing, somehow, that you were important, though I couldn't have said why. I was lost. I'd forgotten how to live, really live. I was just going through motions, waiting for nothing in particular. And now, Katherine looked around at the home they had built, thought about the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, felt the solid warmth of Ethan beside her. Now I know that life can begin again as many times as we need it to, that the heart is stronger than we know, that patience and gentleness can heal wounds we think are permanent. You taught me all of that. We taught each other, Ethan corrected, as he always did. You taught me that love could be deep and lasting, that family could be built even after loss, that home wasn't a place but a person. They sat together as the afternoon faded, two people who had found each other when both most needed finding, who had built a life together that exceeded anything either had imagined possible. The war widow who had thought she would never love again, and the cowboy who had proven her wrong with gentle patience, had created something that would last far beyond their own years, a legacy of love and family and stubborn hope. As the sun set over the prairie they had called home for more than 4 decades, Katherine leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder and felt complete. She had lived 2 lives, really. The first had ended in grief and loss. But the second, the one that began that October day in 1868 when a gentle cowboy showed her that patience and kindness could heal anything, had been everything she never knew she needed. "I love you," she said, the words as true at 65 as they had been at 24. "I love you too," Ethan replied, holding her close. "Always have, always will." And there, in the home they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and love well given, Katherine and Ethan Foster sat together as the stars came out, content in the knowledge that they had proven love could indeed come again, deeper and richer than before, to those brave enough to try.